And Frewin, she has, over the past 12 years, put into practice helping teams see their work differently and then find ways to improve their work using lean and TPS methodologies. She's worked with frontline folks to executives in healthcare, manufacturing, reference laboratories, and now in administrative and support services. She uses lean to help people improve themselves, their interactions, and those around them and their processes. So, Ann, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to share my screen here. And
there it is.
There it is. Excellent. All right. First thing is done as well. So yeah, before I dive into my presentation and to kind of give people a few more minutes to get in here, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself than the bio that Jim just read. So I actually live in the state of Maine. So it's that red spot up there in the upper northeast part of the country. And I'll just disclose right now, we're having thunderstorms. And so hopefully for the next half an hour, my power and my internet will stay on. But that's where I am. So if you're ever in the area, please let me know. I'd love to meet new people and show you around the state. I live there with my husband down in the bottom left-hand corner and my dog Mojo right there in the middle. Mojo is 11 months old and he is all puppy. It's been a challenge training him and raising him up. I also have a son. He's 26. He lives about 20 minutes away, but he's working as an industrial engineer consultant. And so I rarely see him. He's actually traveling to Michigan and Oklahoma this year. And I never expected him to follow in my footsteps. His passions are entrepreneurial and inventing and stuff, but he's making some good money being an industrial engineer. So that's awesome. So as Jim mentioned, I've been doing continuous improvement for over 12 years in healthcare, manufacturing, laboratories, and now administrative space. And prior to healthcare, I did a lot of work in finance, financial planning and analysis, which kind of led me into the process improvement realm. And I moved into process improvement full-time when I was at Central Maine Healthcare. So what I want to share with you today is a story about how we worked on standardizing some work across multiple facilities. The event I'm sharing happened while I was at IDEX, but I've been using these same tools at Central Maine Healthcare and also at ADM now, where I just started in January. So as we get into this presentation, my expectations for you all are that you'll hear me talk about why standards are important, how to standardize when variation exists against multiple facilities, how to spread the standard, and what is needed to sustain that standard at the end. So I'm going to try something here. I don't know if it'll work, but we'll try it. I'd like to kind of just get your thoughts first and foremost about why standardization is important. Why do we want to have standard work? So if you hover your phone camera over that QR code, it'll take you right to my question on Menti. Otherwise, you can go to the website and enter that code 45917161. And I'll leave that up for a couple of minutes so people can get on. They can go out there and just short answers. There's not a word cloud. It's just some short answers as to why you feel standard work is important. Trying to get consistency, ensure safety and quality. Good. Opportunity to improve as a system. Yeah. Reduce variation to have baseline for problems and improvement. Yeah, absolutely. Clear work path. Training. Good. Good. Yeah. Okay, now they're coming in. Standard work is most important as a way for the team doing the work to quickly, oops, I lost that, to quickly see if things are going as they should. By the team, for the team. All right. To help produce the same results and qualities. Excellent. Good, good. Let's see if I can get us back to the presentation. So yes, all excellent. That is exactly what I was thinking as well, what I've learned as well for purpose of standardization. Really want to be following that process the same way every time. And having consistent outcomes, right? If you follow that process the same way every time, you're going to have consistent outcomes every time or most every time. Training, somebody mentioned training. Yeah, if you have standardization, it's a lot easier to train people and the training is more consistent. You don't have that training of, well, this is how I do it. I was trained to do it this way, but this is how I do it and I like it better. You have the same training for everybody. And really at the end of the day, it's to make problems visible, right? We were just at a Toyota plant recently with Jamie Benini and TSSC, and they said, you know, the whole reason for tools, lean tools, is to make problems visible. And standard work is the foundation of all of it, right? So when we have standard work, we see where problems are, and it's a lot easier to make those improvements when everybody is following the process the same way. A couple of days ago, Tim Burke gave a presentation and he referenced the article by Stephen Spear on decoding the Toyota production system, one of my favorite articles. And in that article, Stephen Spear lists 4 rules that we should follow when we're doing continuous improvement. I think it's 4 rules plus 1. And the first rule that he lists is all work shall be highly specified as to content, sequence, timing, and outcome. And so this is really, in essence, standard work. So all of our improvements should result in standard work that is highly specified to content, sequence, timing, and outcome. And when you have that, you're going to have better outcomes, easier training. And then, you know, fundamentally, foundationally, we've all heard it, standardize, then improve. Even though we're called continuous improvement or process improvement, standardization has got to be foundational. And I believe in the Toyota house, it is the foundation of the Toyota house. So early on in my journey, I don't know how to get rid of that little box there. Anyway, early on in my journey, I was introduced to the idea of standardize, do, check, adjust, SDCA. So it's not much different than our friend PDCA that Deming introduced us to. But before we can do anything, we have to standardize. We have to create the standard. Then we implement it, that's the do. Then we check to see if we're getting the outcomes we expect from that standard. And if we are not, we want to adjust the standard, try it again. And if we are, then we can roll it out as a standard. But that first step is really about aligning all of the workers to follow the same process. It's not about telling people what the standard is. It's about getting the people who do the work to develop the standard. And that's kind of the rub, right? How do you get multiple people to agree on what that standard is? So we want to start with our SIPOC, identifying the purpose for the standard. Who is the customer of our process? And what are those outputs that they need or they expect to get? And are we getting them that first and foremost? And we also want to look at our outcomes in terms of our 5 KPIs: safety, quality, delivery, cost, and people. What do we need to have consistently every time? Is it quality? Do we have to have, the same quality coming out, or handoffs? Is it timing? Do we need to maintain a certain time for takt time purposes, or we have a deadline we have to meet? What is that outcome we have to have consistently every time? And so this applies to the administrative space as well as to manufacturing. The example I'm going to give you today is from more of a manufacturing setting, but we can do this in our administrative space as well. IT. Does everybody order, deliver, and implement equipment the same way? Human resources. Do all business partners process employment applications the same way? Finance. Does each department follow the same process to close the month-end books the same way, or process account payables in the same way? And so you're probably thinking, well, yeah, of course they do. We wouldn't be able to close our books, or we wouldn't hire anybody if they weren't following the same process. But do they really follow the same process? Or are they following that high level process, but they're doing their own thing at the micro level? And why does it matter? does it matter? But each time somebody alters the process, the results can be different. So it could take somebody longer, potentially missing your deadlines. Quality could be in jeopardy if the handoffs aren't consistent, which then could create rework for people back upstream, which then can create a delivery problem. So when the process is not followed the same way, then you're going to have these problems. And that's where we want to make sure we understand it. Everybody knows what the process is, they're following it, and then we will see those problems rise up and can address them a lot faster. So in our work, we had 15 facilities and about 15 different ways that the process was followed. On average, our cycle time for the process was greater than 5 minutes. And in order to meet tech time, we needed it to be 5 minutes or less. So we reached out to 3 facilities that we knew had a decent culture of continuous improvement. They'd gone through some training, had done a few projects in their facilities. They had a good idea of what we were trying to accomplish. So we brought together people from those 3 facilities, and they worked together to define the standard. And then they were able to roll it out to the other 12 facilities. And so that's what I'm going to share with you is how we did that process. So when we looked at the process, overall, that high level step was the same. And I don't have it in this deck, but one of the ways we did this was we took the 3 labs that we brought in and we actually had them map out their process. And as they mapped out their process, each of them mapped out their own process. We could see where the variation was. And then we could lay them like this over each other to see what was different and what was the same. And what we saw here at a high level was one of the labs was pouring solution into a smaller jar. And then there was a lab that wasn't adding a filter to the process. And then the first couple of steps there weren't in the same order. Now, did it matter if they laid the cups out before they labeled the tubes? We'll find out. But we had them map out their process, compare the different processes, and then look at how they laid up alongside. So we could kind of see, again, start to see that variation. And then we asked a few questions like, does it actually change the outcome? Does it change the outcome to pour solution into a smaller jar? Is that step value added? Is it waste? And if it's waste, can that waste move upstream? Because one of the things we talked about a lot was sometimes there's waste that you have to have. For instance, delivering supplies to the line. We had some of our techs who were supposed to be doing this value-added work going to get their own supplies. Well, that's something we could have a runner do. So we were moving that waste upstream. So we asked questions like that. Can the waste move upstream? Is it value-added? And the team started to align on what they felt was the right process, high level. We also talked about certain guardrails. We put guardrails in front of them and said, all right, we're going to use these 3 types, these 3 categories of guardrails. The first is rules of the road. This comes straight out of, these are the rules from Steven Spear's article, plus the principle of customer first that Toyota has, right? So always protect the customer was our #1 rule, followed by the 4 rules from Steven Spear, plus his last one of built-in tests. Then we also talked about ideal state. We always wanted our labs to be striving towards one-piece flow and defect-free, an ideal state. We also wanted to make sure they maintained their metrics. What metrics were they using to measure the standard? We didn't want to harm the metrics. We might want to improve the metrics, right? So cycle time was our outcome metric. So that was our delivery one we were focusing on, but we didn't want to harm quality or safety. So those were the guardrails. And so we use these when questions or disagreements came up with the team, we'd go back to these guardrails and we'd say, okay, what guardrail are we talking about? And sometimes they would conflict. So there might be a suggestion that moved them closer to one-piece flow, but maybe it impacted quality. And so the team had to decide which was more important in that situation. Was it more important to maintain the quality at that point or get to one-piece flow? Or could we do it both? Is there another way to do it so we had both? And that was a lot of the conversations. We'd always go back to these guardrails to see if the change they wanted to make stayed within the guardrails. I felt this was one of the most useful parts of that improvement that we did. The standardization that we did. So they looked at this and they said, okay, we're going to remove the pouring the solution and we're going to add the filter. Keep that as part of our high level process. The next thing we need to do is start to look at the order and understand what each lab did in the step. So we went out to the labs and we said, okay, what are you doing? We know there's variation within each of these steps. We had a good sense of what that variation was. So we had the teams create a matrix listing the variation they knew on the left-hand side. So what tubes did you label? How many cups were you putting in front of you at what time? Did you have a dispenser for that solution or not? And they started to look to see where all that variation was. And this also helped them to decide which way they should go. Who did it the most? Like, was there one that everybody did or not? So have a dispenser. It says, no, they don't have a dispenser. Although the team actually at the end of the day proved that the dispenser actually would help them. So they were moving towards that at the end. But we could start to see here where the variation existed. And then looking at those high level steps, they took their high level steps and they put the common variation under each step so they could really see what they needed to focus on. And it was apparent that the biggest variation ended up being where the number of cups that they laid out in front of them. Now, in this process, this made a big difference. And we knew this going in, and we were trying to move them towards one piece flow, but we couldn't tell them they had to do 1 cup. We needed them to figure out what was best for them and their customers. And so we had a lot of conversation. Did it really matter if you had 1 cup in front of you or 5 cups in front of you, or added solution to 5 cups at once, or the sample? Now, you have to understand in this process, each cup got a unique sample. It wasn't, we put a sample in 5 different cups. Each cup was 1 unique sample. And of course, I'm sure we've all experienced this. Batching is faster. If I batch, I can meet my 5-minute mark. But we were able to have them try it and show that actually batching was not faster. And in fact, there was a quality issue. It was a potential for cross-contamination or actually even errors within the samples. So they ended up choosing to move to 1 piece flow with 1 cup at a time. And we still got some pushback from people in the labs, but eventually they did actually all go to 1 piece flow. But labeling the tubes was a little bit more touchy. This one took a lot of cycles through the SDCA process. How they labeled that tubes, that in and of itself was pretty much waste, except for the fact that it helped maintain integrity of where the sample was in the process. So, each lab had their own opinion as to which was the best way. So they did have to iterate on this and really find the best way to show that a 1 and 6 really did was the right way to meet the needs that they had of their team. And I think that was more of an outcome as far as quality. Like they felt that maintained quality the best, and was visually easier to see where things were by labeling tubes 1 and 6. So the group had managed to get to the standard. They tested it. They felt good about it. The labs were on board with it. And so now they were ready to spread and sustain. So I want to try another Mentimeter survey on challenges. What challenges have you faced when you've gone to standardize a process? What are some of the issues that you have faced? So same Mentimeter, just put your phone over that and it'll take you to the question. I'll give you a few minutes to answer those questions, and then we'll look at the responses. If I can get to that one. hopefully you guys are able to get to this question. Anybody having trouble with that? Excellent, there we go. All right, people not following or skipping steps. Communicating the standard. Yes, we're going to talk about that. Not wanting to change. Yep, standards were developed by somebody else than the team doing the work. Alignment on how the process should be completed. Yeah, especially across regions. Yep. Team keeps their own variations themselves and doesn't speak up as to why they do it that way. Yes, we faced that challenge. We definitely did. And we overcame it, probably not perfectly. I think there was still some variation that was kept, but we did overcome it for the most part. Great, those are great. Ties right into what I'm going to share next. So I got to get back to my PowerPoint. So this one, right? You go to spread or do improvement or do standard work. No, I don't have time to take your round wheels. I got my square and I like dragging my rocks through the dirt. We've all seen this, and that is probably what we all can relate to the most. Yep, too busy. So this is actually a model that I use a lot for my lean projects. It's actually something I saw on LinkedIn years ago. I referenced Mary Lippett down at the bottom there. I think I finally found out that was, I think, the source of this. There might have been another source. There's a couple attributions out there on the big wide web. But above all of it, though, is you've got to have leadership support. And I will say that is one of the reasons we were successful in the end, is the directive from our leader was that everybody would be standard by the end of the year, or within a year. Within a year, we would have standard work. So it was a goal for the labs. They were expected to achieve this. And so as we were working through this, and as we started to communicate our processes, the first time we did this, we didn't tell them about what resources they would need, or maybe we told them what resources they'd need, but we didn't actually give them a link to where to get those resources or how to order it or what specifically to order. And that did create frustration in our labs. So we, in subsequent standards that we rolled out, we made sure that the labs were communicating details about the resources that were needed to be successful. Incentive was another one. We actually, and this just happened through the report out that the labs did. In their report out, they included feedback from their team members. What was the reaction of their team members when they implemented the standard work? And we got some really good feedback from, like, hey, I was really worried I wasn't going to like this, but I find that it is a lot easier. I really enjoy that dispenser. They really talked about the process and what they liked about it, which helped get other people on board in the other labs. So making sure that people understood what was in it for them and hearing about it from their peers helped to drive productive change. And above all, we made sure we had very clear why. Why were we making this change? Why were we standardizing this process this way? That had to be clear as well. At the end of the day, our biggest win was creating what we called collaboration calls. The calls were weekly, and they were led by supervisors and leads. Actually, they were led by the same lab. So we assigned one of the labs to run the meeting, right, to be the facilitator of the meeting. And they would own that meeting for 3 or 4 months, and then they'd hand it off to another lab. But supervisors and leads were required to attend, and they were required to participate. We asked managers and directors if they wanted to attend. They were optional, but highly encouraged. But we asked them to stay quiet. Let their supervisors have the floor. This was a supervisor meeting, not a manager meeting. We brought those matrices, and we use those matrices a lot from a current state perspective, and then I'll show you our future state, how we helped them drive to that standard using the matrix. all the presentations were done by their peers. So it started out by the 3 labs who put together the standard, brought that to the team. They presented the process maps that they used. They presented the metrics that they looked at, the improvements that they made. So that they went from 5.5 minutes to 4.8 minutes. They showed that. They had a lot of visuals, pictures, and then we had a clear implementation plan of when we wanted to have this rolled out in the other labs. The follow-up then was every week after that first presentation, 3 or 4 labs would come and present their work, what they had done to start getting that standard rolled out. So in the first week, they might not have done a lot. So those labs might just share a couple conversations they had, feedback they got. They were encouraged to come back to the group with questions from their team or challenges that they were facing as they rolled it out. And then other labs were able to talk about their challenges and how they overcame those same issues. So there was a lot of, it really was collaborative. We asked them that they not make additional improvements on the standard until they rolled out the standard, until everybody was using the standard. And then if and only then they could bring an improvement to the team if they could show that it was an actual improvement and not one of those, I want to do it this way because I like it, or we don't want to change. And we did have a group that there was a lab that had made some changes. They didn't want to, I think that was the point I saw in that that Mentimeter question, right? They had wanted to hold on to their variation because guess what? They were different. But, and so they would bring ideas to the group because they thought they were better, but they didn't have data to show that it was. So we really had to get them to get to standard and then show us if the improvement was actually an improvement and not just I want to do it this way. That's where our leadership came in, having our managers and directors on that call. It helped them hear what was going on in the other labs and why the standards were created, how they were created, to help drive some of that support back to the labs, that they were making sure that the teams were working and getting aligned. Matrix that we use. So we use this, the future state down below shows the standard column right here. If you can see my I think I can mark it up right here. The standard, and then the different colors represent where they were off of standard. And this wasn't used for finger pointing or blaming. It helped us to know who was moving closer to standard and where there were still gaps, and then finding out why. So like one process we rolled out, the labs didn't have the right resources or they couldn't get their resources. And so what did we need to do to help them? Another time, COVID, right? So there were staffing issues and they couldn't implement because of all the staffing changes they were going through, or the lack of people who were out for, COVID. So we could understand what was happening. So when leadership asked us, hey, who are we still working on getting to standard? We could say this location and this location, and here is why. So it gave us the information we needed to escalate up the chain where we had to. All right, now I have to get rid of the laser pointer. So 1 year later, we had actually standardized all 5 roles in the department. We had engaged the frontline staff in improvement. And we were hearing words in that collaboration call like Kanban, flow, standard, visual management, metrics. They were using them in the right context. It was just part of their day-to-day language after a year of doing this. And so that was, for us, seeing the change of behavior and the adoption of this language and the adoption of not just the tools, but the true behavior behind Lean, showed us that we had really made big strides and we had really started to create that culture of continuous improvement within our labs. So that is my story. Thank you for listening. That is my contact information. And I'm also on LinkedIn and more than happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn and any questions or comments. I hope that somebody has a question for me 5 presentations in a few hours from now. Don't forget about me when we get to the question and answer session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ann. Yeah, write your questions down and certainly don't forget them. That was wonderful. I get just real quickly is I think a lot of people forget how, using standard work, people think of it as a tool and it's a shop kind of thing and all that. But really, if you utilize it, what a powerful management system it really is. It's much more than just a tool. It becomes a management system. And as you noted, how it drives the cultural change you want to see. So I think that was an excellent illustration of that, of how you guys are utilizing that from that standpoint. So thank you.